Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special edition of Adults Talking About Cool Stuff. This is not a numbered ATACS episode. This is going to be our opportunity to tell you guys a little bit more about who we are, what we play, and what we do. This is our special ATACS Meet the Crew episode. So we have the entire crew here, starting with me. I am Paul, your host from Atlanta. Also joining us is Mr. Nate from Wendell, North Carolina. Hello, Nate. How are you?
That's me.
That's you. We've also got Mr. Ryan from New York, New York. Hello, Ryan.
Hello.
How are you today?
Good.
Excellent.
Is that a trick question?
No, it's not. It's not a trick question, actually. Mr. Flex from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hello, Flex.
I am here.
And we also have Miss Stephanie from Atlanta. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi. Everyone's hello sounds like you're being held at gunpoint. It's okay, guys.
Well, they're just saving their words because there's going to be a lot of them said relatively soon.
What you don't know is that I am being held at gunpoint.
That's a problem. Maybe we should stop the podcast and call the proper authorities for that one. But that's fine. You'll be fine. Last but not least, Mr. Will from Greenville, North Carolina. Hello, Will. How are you?
Outstanding.
So just to give everyone a little bit of a heads up, we were thinking this would be more of a free flowing type conversation where we talk a little bit about what our gaming experience was growing up, what we're into nowadays, and a little bit about what we do in real life. And since Mr. Will has actually sat down and wrote a small novel in preparation for this episode, we're gonna kick things off with him. Will, you grew up across the street from me. We were friends since we were like 11 or 12, and you've been playing a lot of stuff. So how do you really want to introduce yourself to the ATACS crew here?
Well, I guess I'll start by saying just kind of what I do. So I guess that informs, like all of us, our profession kind of informs the way that we, I guess some of the things that we're interested in and how we look at things. So I'm actually a counselor at the College of Nursing at a mid-sized university in Eastern North Carolina, East Carolina University. When I'm not playing games, I'm playing basketball. I'm reading articles on the Atlantic, and I'm watching lots of movies. Recently, I've been into courtroom dramas.
Oh, boy.
Because, it's just, like I was watching Kramer versus Kramer the other day. It's pretty sweet movie from 1979.
All right.
I have a video game you might like then.
Oh, wow. You're right. I actually might. I might, if I had a system to play it on.
Yeah, you might.
So I grew up actually, I'm probably going to be, maybe myself and Paul, we might be kind of the anomalies here. I'm not sure. But I grew up with a personal computer, and I had a PC for a long time. So, I mean, even when the internet was first sort of coming out, like I had a CompuServe account. We had the dial-up, we had a 28.8 and then a 33.6. And then, of course, the 56K as
Ryan. Yeah.
I don't even know what those things are.
And then, and I actually had an Apple IIe before that I played games like Sticky Bear and Oregon Trail on.
Yeah.
But PC, mostly when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time playing this game called Tony La Russa Baseball. And it's sort of, it's kind of like a combination management sim and baseball game.
Yeah.
And I think it came out in I know that it had the stats. It had the authentic stats from 1993. So that's around that time.
Nice.
I also played a whole bunch of, a lot of first-person shooters growing up. So like the Doom, Wolfenstein 3D. I remember having Doom WADs, which are levels that you could download online to play. Quake, Duke Nukem 3D, those sorts of situations. Outlaws. Another game I spent a lot of time playing. I played a lot of SimCity 2000.
Yep, I played a lot of that one too.
Nice.
And
Classic.
I also played a lot of a game, I think it's called like PGA Tour 97. There was some golf game that I used to spend a lot of time playing. But that was kind of really sort of what I don't know if you could say honed your craft or not, but that's kind of what I spent a lot of time playing.
Yeah. So you were mostly PC throughout the 90s?
Yeah. I don't think I had a Super Nintendo until a number of years after it was out. And even then, it wasn't necessarily like my main system. You know, I played like King Griffey Jr. baseball on it, Cal Ripken Jr. baseball. My childhood was a lot of baseball. Also, yeah. A lot of my favorite Super Nintendo games, I actually played on emulators like many years after they were released. Like I did not play them with a Super Nintendo controller during the time. I remember, I don't think I got a 64, and that was actually the last Nintendo console I owned. I don't think I got a 64 until like after the GameCube was out. And even then it was like a hand-me-down with some garbage games. Of course, you know, just about any game is garbage on the 64 because that controller is so bad. But that was what I ended up spending a lot of time playing when I was growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember playing quite a bit of the SNES Mario Kart, but it was you were on the left side of the keyboard, I was on the right side of the keyboard, and we were hoping that Miss Campbell wouldn't come around the corner and see us playing Super NES stuff on the school PCs.
Yeah, those old Mario Karts were so brutal. Like, I just remember the one level with like the little ice blocks, and you'd run into those ice blocks, and it was like you'd go from like 60 to 0, and you'd like knock backwards. And it was so unforgivable. Like you had this little opening you had to thread, to actually keep from getting completely obliterated.
How did you guys manage to play Mario Kart and keep quiet? Like my first time playing Mario Kart was like recently with like Mario Kart 8, and I can't keep quiet while I play it. I scream all the time.
It was a loud classroom.
Okay.
And also,
so you guys were quiet. You were just
also,
quiet
when you're a kid, I mean, like everybody is loud.
Yeah.
So I mean, it could have been a number of things there, but yeah. So I don't know. I guess I'd say that after that, college was. Or actually, high school was a lot of Soul Calibur 2, a lot of Mario Kart Double Dash, and a whole crap ton of Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
Which is probably the game, even though it's not a video game. I did play it MT Magic Online, but it's probably the game I've spent almost more time and money on than just about anything else.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, and so I played a lot of that in high school, and I continued playing a lot of that in college. Although I dropped off the Soul Calibur 2 and added on things like Guild Wars, Oblivion.
Yeah.
That sort of situation. And then it probably wasn't until I actually entered grad school or maybe the year before I entered grad school that I actually got a 360. And only then did I really start like playing like everything I could get my hands on.
Right.
Before that, it was more just sort of, I'd have like one or two big games, like an Oblivion or or not even a Grim Dawn, but like a Magic or something like that. And I just kind of play those. But yeah, that was the Williams gaming trajectory.
And now you're so you've transitioned from really deep diving into a handful of games like Magic or Diablo 2 or whatever else.
Yeah.
Into playing half a dozen short indie games a week.
There you go. And I think that part of that is just where you are in your life.
Yeah.
When you're growing up, you don't have a lot of money. And when I was growing up, there were fewer games that were released a year. And so you've got less to choose from and you've got less money. And so it's kind of, I often think about like certain games that have features, and I'll say to myself, I'm like, man, it would be so neat if I could see that, or if that would have come out when I was growing up. Like how deep would I have gotten into this system?
Yeah.
I've always felt that way about like Hitman Absolution, and I think I might have mentioned that at some point or another. But it's got this sort of system where you can kind of create your own contracts, and so you can. So let's say you want to just kind of challenge yourself. If you can actually complete a level like wearing a chicken costume and then like hitting the target in the head with a brick, then you can kind of create that sort of level, and then your friends could try and do it and see if they could kind of recreate the experience or whatever. But I actually remember making at one point Age of Empires scenarios. And then when I was growing up, I made Outlaws maps. I actually learned how to use, there was a map editor called Lawmaker that actually looked kind of like AutoCAD, if anyone knows anything about drafting.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to make my own Outlaws levels. And like some of them actually kind of got pretty big, and the community wasn't enormous, but you know, they would be played in rotation with other maps. I had a map that was, it was a capture the flag map, and one half of the map was like the Wild West, which the game was the Wild West. And then there was a portal in the middle that you could take to the other side, and it was like I tried to make it look futuristic.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was almost like you've got you've got your Wild West side and you got your futuristic side. And I tried to like put little interesting things in it. So the characters, the characters in the main game, there was a little gallery in the bottom of the CTF map on the futuristic side where I had the characters cryogenically frozen in these chambers.
Yep.
So it was almost like they were still around. But I used to do those deep dives, you know, really, really get into one game. And now I guess I just don't have either the patience or the inclination to do it anymore.
What is it about the indie games that you're like drawn to? Is it that they're short, or the fact that there was such a small group or one person making them, or?
Well, I think now what I like is that a lot of times they're willing to take chances that a lot of the other games aren't really willing to take, and they're willing to be a little bit more niche. You know, a lot of times your AAA games try to be all things to all people, and I think a lot of the indie games are more okay with basically saying like, we're making this for this type of player, and that's okay. You know, and I know that there's an audience for this, and it may not be the audience that can support. You know, I mean, one of the most interesting stories has been. And this isn't really recent, but if anyone's ever watched the whole thing about like Dead Space and Dead Space 3 and how many copies the publisher thought they were going to move of Dead Space 3. And it's like, you know, you've got a mid-tier game that's really, really good at doing what it's doing. You know, like, why does everything have to be, you know, Call of Duty big, you know? Why can't you just spin?
That's debatable, by the way. But
what is? What's debatable?
You're saying that Dead Space was really good at doing what it was doing.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, this is my section, Ryan. Okay, so
just
get
saying.
out my autobiography, man. Get out.
Yeah, but anyway, so so they really did try, and you know, they threw in all this DLC, they threw in the co-op campaign, which although creative, didn't necessarily fit with really what the games were trying to do. It didn't feel like to me. So, but that to me is an example of like where you just kind of, I think there are certain ways to be content with creating games for certain populations, even if it's not for everybody.
No, I hadn't really thought about that before. Like, these games are so niche that when you get to play them, if it's like like a group of people that like maybe you don't normally associate with, it's like getting a front row seat into what they're about. So it kind of fits back in with like you being a counselor and everything. Like, you get to understand all these different groups and niches, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot too lately, especially after playing stuff like God of War, which throws in a lot of stuff trying to be all things all people, and then at some point it's almost like they sand off all the rough edges and uniqueness to the point where it's like, well, this just doesn't feel like anything anymore. And then the indie games, while they can be, I'm sorry.
I said that's debatable, but go ahead.
Yeah, but the indie games will be really rough in a lot of ways, but can also, as Will was saying, like really show like one person or, you know, a small number of creators, like what they're trying to go for. And it may be quote unquote rough around the edges in some like traditional senses, but it can also be a lot more ambitious in other ways.
Yeah. So the only other things I guess I kind of wanted to mention, you know, Paul had asked originally about like favorite games, you know, and for the longest time, I thought that, you know, I would have probably told you that my favorite game was like BioShock, the first BioShock. And there are certain elements that BioShock has that I really like, you know. First of all, I like action horror games, so things like Condemned, Fear, and Dead Space. So BioShock checks that box. Also, it kind of allows me to create something that I felt like was kind of unique. So if you wanted to kind of do a build that was like freeze and wrench, or maybe like specialize in the bees or whatever it is, you know, you could kind of like take different like perks or whatever to like maximize that. But I think more than anything, like just the fact that the twist, you know, the BioShock twist, I guess I didn't think that games could affect me that way. You know, I guess I didn't feel that. And so it wasn't even so much that the twist was particularly profound. It was just that like it sort of made me feel something that I hadn't really felt before playing games.
Right.
And so, I mean, since then, I now probably, if you ask me now, I probably wouldn't say that, you know, the first BioShock is necessarily my favorite game, but I think it was a real kind of turning point for me, because I guess it made me realize that games could be more than just fun, you know, that they could be thought provoking or, you know, emotional.
Send a message in some way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
That, yeah. But that was just sort of, I think now if someone were to ask me, I don't know, I think over the last couple of years, What Remains of Edith Finch has probably been one of the most kind of prominent things for me. And, you know, there are, you know, interactivity issues with that game, but I think in terms of the types of experiences and the types of things I try to get out of games, I think Edith Finch delivers on a lot of those pieces, sort of, you know, things that resonate with me emotionally, or things that make me think about the world in a new way or in a different way.
Right.
Edith Finch did a good job with that.
Well, with you having like this fondness for the indie games and thought-provoking and a little rough around the edges, but kind of like diamond in the roughs, like how do you feel about the big AAA games that kind of keep pumping out the same stuff?
Well, I don't pay a ton of attention to them usually. I mean, I guess if they have some sort of, you know, one thing I guess I didn't mention actually is that like I love co-op. So that's a weird thing. I'd probably need to do more deep diving myself to figure out exactly why I like co-op so much.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to like the, you know, the AAA space, there are certain things that I guess get kind of tired of after a while, but I try to evaluate them, you know, on their merits as much as possible.
Right.
You know, so I don't know. I guess I still play a number of AAA things, but a lot of times I just know what I'm in for. You know, I know that I'm going to get maybe more polished voice acting, more polished graphics, maybe more refined gameplay. But a lot of times I might not get the kind of heart or the kind of, I guess, purity of vision.
Right.
You know, Flex talks a lot about like purity of vision in a game that like sets out and knows like what it's trying to do and kind of executes on those fronts.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes, you know, you lose something when you try to be everything to everybody. So I just try to kind of be realistic about where I'm going. Like, and of course, if I play an indie game, I have to kind of steel myself. I'm like, all right, there might be things that could have been play tested a bit more here, you know, or maybe this voice acting is going to be a little bit stilted, but either way, yeah, that's kind of where I am with that.
Okay. Yeah, that's and it's kind of interesting. You know, you brought up a lot of the PC stuff, and that's almost mirrors exactly with, you know, how I was coming up with too. I was always a bit behind on the consoles, but playing a lot of those old PC games, playing a lot of the first person shooters from back then, which were just so fast. I mean, Unreal Tournament and Outlaws, like both of those games, it's like, you know, you make a mistake, you're dead. There is no regenerating health. So, you know, it was a lot more twitch when it came to those kinds of things. But yeah, that's pretty cool. So was there anything else that you really were wanting to kind of touch on?
Not particularly. I think the other things that you'll find me kind of gravitating to are 2D and 3D stealth, where they have like where I'm given a lot of good environmental information.
Right.
I like games. I have a particularly weird set of humor, and I like games that kind of appeal to that, like Red Alert 2 and No One Lives Forever 2. And other than that, I think I have this weird fondness for games that kind of have like bullet time or like a kinetic feel to them. So like Remedy's games or like Super Hot. Something about that stuff like just really appeals to me. Like I love the sort of slow and dramatic action you know. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates William's tastes.
Yep, that makes sense.
Mm.
So I think probably we talked about this in the pre-show a little bit. Nate, Flex, since you guys were growing up together, you kind of wanted to take this as a joint. So Flex, I guess I'll just kind of start with you. Why is Nintendo the best thing that's ever been made?
They're not.
Oh, come on. Come on.
They're good. They're very good. I don't know if they're the best thing ever. Yeah, full disclosure, Nate and I were brothers, so
What?
Something.
what? Surprise. Yeah, so we have a lot of shared history here. And
Are you also a doctor?
look, there can only be one doctor in the family,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Neither of them are doctors.
That joke might go a little too deep for this.
Yeah, but we did grow up on a lot of Nintendo for sure. We did not have an NES, but we did play a good chunk of NES games. Like we had family who had an NES. I also remember playing a lot of Atari 2600 growing up. Our dad had one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have much memory of that, Nate, but
I
nice.
remember Qbert.
yeah, some
Yeah,
Qbert,
Qbert.
some Pong, some Centipede, some Missile Command,
Yeah.
Circus.
All the
Had
classics.
a good
Battle?
representation of like old school gaming. Well, old school for our generation at least.
Yeah. Yeah, we played a lot. I remember playing our dad had a surprising number of Atari 2600 games.
He had a good collection. I don't even know whatever happened to that Atari.
I assume he sold it at some point. I don't think he still has it.
Yeah, I don't
I
think
had
so.
a guy across the street who had a Commodore 64 that I used to play. He had like Olympic games and stuff on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, Video Olympics on the Atari 2600 was pretty sweet.
Mhm.
But yeah, I remember getting into that stuff a lot. I actually remember playing both Pong and Qbert against our dad a lot. And I would pretty much always win Pong, and he would pretty much always win Qbert. That was the split.
Nice.
And then, yeah, we played some NES growing up. I don't know how much you remember about that. And the reason I asked Nate, I don't know how much he remembers about this stuff, is because he's a little younger than me. So
Yeah, I would definitely remember playing some NES games at cousins' houses. Specifically, I remember Duck Hunt and some of the Mario Bros. Games. I don't really remember anything specific other than those.
do you remember Double Dragon? That's the other one I remember playing a lot.
Not really. Like, I think I have some vague memories of a Double Dragon game, but I don't know if it was that one or a later one.
Yeah, because there was a Super Nintendo one we played a lot as well.
Yeah.
Battletoads and Double Dragon.
Yeah, Battletoads and Double Dragon, I definitely remember that.
Yeah.
Oh, Battletoads.
But yeah, the first system we actually had was a Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
And I would say for me, that was like kind of where I got into gaming for reals.
Mhm. I feel like I was still maybe not. I don't know if I wasn't old enough or just didn't care that much about it until later. Like I remember playing
I don't
some
know.
of
Yeah,
the Super Nintendo, but I don't like think of it as the system I grew up on by any means.
yeah. For you probably think more of the 64 is the one you grew up on.
For sure.
Yeah. Do you even remember, like, what Super Nintendo games do you even remember playing at the time? Like, I know you've gone back and played a lot after the fact, but
I do remember playing Link to the Past. I do remember playing Mario World.
I remember you liking Mario RPG a lot.
Yeah, Mario RPG is my jam.
That was a great game.
It is.
That was a great game.
And yeah, a couple other random platformers
probably some
and
Donkey
things like
Kong.
that. Yeah.
Some Aladdin, which was a very good game.
Yes, and there was also a Genesis one that was
Which
a
was different.
different game.
But
Completely
also
different
very
game.
good. But both versions very good.
Yeah. So a lot of those types of things kind of bled together for me for a long time until I went back and played some of those Super Nintendo games again later.
hmm
But yeah,
Yeah.
I do remember them.
And some of those at the time I also missed, like the Final Fantasies on the Super Nintendo and Super Metroid, like those, specifically Final Fantasies 4, 6, and Super Metroid. I remember those three games.
Mystic Quest.
I'm sorry?
Mystic Quest.
I've
Come
still
on,
never
man.
played Mystic Quest. But yeah, those two Final Fantasies and Super Metroid are three that I just was not aware of at the time and ended up playing later. But yeah, at the time I remember playing a whole lot of Mario World. Like Mario World was my jam.
Yeah.
And that was the game we first got with the Super Nintendo. I remember getting it with Mario World and Super Mario Kart. So those two got a lot of play. And I remember playing a whole lot of all three Donkey Kong Country games and Yoshi's Island and Mario RPG and A Link to the Past. I would say those were, and Aladdin. I would say those were probably like the games I played the most during that era.
Yeah, I definitely have like specific like involuntary reactions to some of those games, which I think you'll find this funny. Is like, I think I like Donkey Kong a lot because we would play it co-op. The Donkey Kong Country games, and I think I don't have fond memories of Mario Kart because I suspect you just beat me all the time.
Yep.
I have no memory of this, so that could be true.
So that's how I remember those games.
Yeah. We did also have a Genesis during this time.
Ooh, what game on Genesis?
Yeah, but we didn't play. I don't remember playing a ton of Genesis games. Like I remember playing the Sonics. I remember playing a lot of the Strike games, like Urban Strike and Desert Strike.
Yeah, those games really stand out to me for some reason. Silly little helicopter game.
Yeah. I mean, they were totally fine. And the Aladdin game, like we mentioned. But I don't remember playing, honestly, a ton of other Genesis games.
Yeah.
In the years since, I've gone back and kind of like caught up on Streets of Rage and some of the other Genesis games like Rystar, some stuff like that. But at the time, I just remember never really getting that into the Genesis.
Like we had the Sonic games, but I don't remember loving them.
Yeah, we had Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Sonic and Knuckles, but yeah, I never got that into them. And I don't know what happened to that Genesis, but we didn't have it for very long. But then we transitioned into the 60. We had both a 64 and a PS1. Pretty much, we probably got the 64 first, but we had them basically at the same time. And as Nate mentioned, that's probably where I always envision Nate as an N64 kid.
that's not far off.
I just feel like your like 5 favorite games of all time are like Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Smash Bros, like Rogue Squadron, like I don't know, just you had like this set of half dozen GoldenEye, like half dozen 64 games that you played to death. Yeah,
all of those 64 games, the big ones that most people would think of, because that system did not have a ton of great games.
It did not.
But the ones that it did have, I got really into and played way more than anybody should.
And I was similar. Like I liked a lot of those games, like Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time. Obviously, all-time classics. And I remember I definitely played a lot of GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. Perfect Dark in particular, because its multiplayer options were so customizable. I played a crap ton of that game.
Yeah, I played quite a bit of that one as well.
Yeah. And then on the PlayStation side, that was between Mario RPG and PlayStation 1 JRPGs. That was...
Yeah.
Nate and I went down a JRPG rabbit hole, let's say.
Yeah. Played a lot of big JRPGs.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people around that time, I mean, that was basically like the JRPG golden age of like the early 2000s.
Yeah, like mid to late 90s through maybe the early 2000s, yeah.
Good time games.
And we played a lot of the typical Square ones, like Final Fantasies, all of them, and
Final Fantasy, all of them.
Yeah, and Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Mario RPG. I think the odd one that Nate and I got really into that maybe a lot of people didn't was Star Ocean: The Second Story.
Yes,
which is a fantastic game.
Which I mean, that's kind of a sleeper hit. I never played it, but I've heard people who played it really kind of dig it.
It's very good.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it has this side dungeon called the Cave of Trials, which is absolutely insane.
I feel like that Cave of Trials like haunted you for years.
Yeah, I have a long storied history with the Cave of Trials, because so the level cap in that, like most RPGs at the time, the level cap was 100. level cap in this game was like 255 or something like that.
It was 255 because 0 to 255. That's a power of 2, right?
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
And I'll give the short version of this, but basically, like a dozen floors into this just ginormous hours-long dungeon that does not have many save points, you hit a floor. You normally have a party of 4 characters. And you hit a floor that only allows 2 characters. And you're like, oh, wait, this is really hard. And at some point, so a lot of these JRPGs I was playing multiple times over because, like, you're a kid, it's the summer, you have, like, way too much free time. So I started the game over and was only using 2 characters through the whole game because experience points were evenly divided between the number of characters you were using in battle. So if you only use 2 characters, they would level up way quicker. So then when I got to the Cave of Trials, I only had 2 characters that were really high level. And I did all of this, and at some point our PlayStation 2, the disc reader stopped working.
Yeah.
For PlayStation 1 game.
Yeah. It could play.
And so we had this long
PlayStation 2 game
as I was doing the Cave of Trials.
Yeah.
So we had like a period of like months or maybe even a year where we could not play PS1 games on our PS2, and we didn't have our PS1 anymore. So I like all my progress got cut short, and then by the time we got it back around to it, I had no idea what I was doing, and I think I started the game over again. Yeah, it was the process. I eventually beat it though, so check that one off. But
victories.
Yeah. But and then from there, I feel like at this point, Nate and I like kind of, tell me how you think about this, but we kind of turned into like people who just played everything.
Yeah, like I think like, it's almost like this weird thing of like a compulsion to try to see every type of game. And I think then we would like, whether it was conscious or unconsciously, like push each other along to like, oh, you played that game? I need to play it too. Yeah. So we would just end up playing all these weird different things.
Yeah, it was a little bit of just like getting everything we could get our hands on.
Yeah.
Like I would say through the end of the like 64 PS1 era, and we also had a Game Boy. It was like, oh, we didn't really have access to much. And we played mostly Nintendo stuff, and then those PS1 era JRPGs, which in retrospect we didn't really play much on the PS1 other than JRPGs.
Yeah, it was pretty much just those.
Yeah. But like I always like in my mind, starting with the next generation, which is like GameCube, PS2, Xbox, like we basically just started playing everything. Mm-hmm. And PC, we weren't really that big into until the late 90s as well. So like
late 90s Blizzard games on the PC.
Yeah, like Age of Empires 1 and 2, StarCraft, like Roller Coaster Tycoon, Diablo 2, like that kind of late 90s, turn of the century era PC games is like really where we started playing PC. So we missed a lot of stuff before that, of course, but we didn't have access to it really.
Right.
And from there, I'd say we just kind of played a lot of everything.
Mm-hmm. So whenever you kind of moved into that, like playing a bit of everything, was it more one of those where you were just wanting to branch out, or was it just like, video games had evolved to where so many more genres were fun that you just kind of, it was like a natural evolution of gaming, or was it more of an evolution of what your tastes were?
I think it's both, and it's also just evolution of access. Like a lot of my most distinct gaming memories are when I played a good game in a new genre. So like GoldenEye was a big game for me because it was really the first person shooter I played. Like Mario RPG and Final Fantasy VII, which I think I played around the same time, were like the first RPGs I played. Age of Empires and StarCraft were like the first strategy games I played. So I really like I've always liked seeing new things. And I think once I started having access to more, and like you said, games started diversifying a lot more, I just got really interested in seeing what types of things could be made and what types of things people were making. And I I think that still continues today. Like that's a lot of what drives my game playing is just seeing what weird, cool stuff is out there that I've never seen before. I'll often, I definitely have like my comfort food genres and stuff, but I think what excites me most about games is just seeing the different things people come up with that I've never seen before. And that really excites me.
So with the two of you having such a diverse like range of different types of genres you've played, I'm curious. So you have someone come over to your place and you want to show off like you are just the most badass gamer ever. What game do you pop in to impress someone?
You mean like to just show off my hot skills or what?
Yeah, your skills with a Z. Yeah.
Oh boy. I will say before I answer that, Nate and I probably started diversifying a little around like, what would you say? Like maybe the HD era. Like at some point we didn't live together anymore.
Yeah. So we weren't just buying the same thing. Like, so I feel like we had a long time. We'll get back to your question. I'm sorry for derailing you, Steph, but I feel like we had a long time where we would like our birthdays were on opposite halves of the year, and so we would like sit down together and be like, so what games do we want to get for my birthday?
Yeah.
And like the next
that's so cute.
birthday, like, okay, what games are we going to get for your birthday now?
Yeah, like
so, we
our
were
two
always,
birthdays
like,
and Christmas were basically in like equal thirds of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, once we stopped living together, we were more like buying games individually, and then started diverging a little bit. But
did you guys ever fight? Did you guys ever fight about like, no, you don't want to get that game for your birthday because this game came out?
I don't remember because I think we just all wanted to play everything.
Yeah, okay. There was some, and I'm sure like there was definitely probably.
I remember asking him, "Why are you still playing so much Diablo 2 at one point?"
Yeah, there were definitely times where I would get like.
Paul and I could answer that. It's because it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter that I've already got a level 99 sorceress. I need to have another level 99 sorceress because this one's going to be lightning instead of frost. So
exactly, yeah.
But I also think at the time we were doing that birthday stuff, there weren't so many games that we couldn't get all the ones we wanted. So it was never like, oh, don't get this one because I'd rather you get this other one.
And I also think there was probably some generally just me like deferring to you because you, I think, were more interested in like doing the research to figure out what games were out there.
Right.
So it's like, hey, tell me what to get and I'll play it.
Yeah. But we've, like, even in, I don't know, the past 10, 15 years when we have been living separately, I think we've still ended up playing a lot of similar stuff.
Yeah.
Even though we definitely have our points where one of us gets really into one thing and the other person doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't know, back to Steph's question, I don't know that I really think of anything as to show off to people.
The best answer
is there an age range that we're talking about?
It could be anything.
See, because I'm thinking the correct answer for Flex is Elite Beat Agents.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That was one of the ones that would be on the short list because, oh boy, I got into Elite Beat Agents something fierce. I mean, there are 19 songs in that game, and I beat every song on the highest difficulty with a perfect score. And what I mean with a perfect score, I mean hitting every single note with perfect accuracy.
I was happy to just get an A on everything, and I stopped. I didn't go for the specials.
I'm with you, Steph.
And I'm not even talking about like perfect, because like if you think about like Guitar Hero or something, like you could hit every note in the song, but there's like different levels of accuracy you can hit each note. So I'm talking about like I hit every single note in every single song with like the perfect timing.
All right. Well, then I think you're correct. That might be his show-off game.
Yeah.
Right. He was born in a crossfire hurricane.
Oh, man.
All right,
there was probably a time where I would have said Guitar Hero. But
really?
That's certainly not the case anymore.
Oh my gosh, Nate went down a Guitar Hero rabbit hole. You have no idea.
I did too. I didn't know we had that in common.
Yeah, for the first Guitar Hero, especially on PS2, I played absolutely to death. But I played all of them a lot.
Nice.
And what were some of the hardest tracks on that one?
Oh God. and it depends on which ones you're talking about, because like the earlier Guitar Heroes were a lot more about.
Well, I'm talking about just Guitar Hero 1. What was the hardest tracks on that one?
I mean, Bark at the Moon was like the end game song.
Okay.
I remember that one being a nightmare.
That was really hard. There was
also the Guitar Hero 1, like something about the timing and the guitar itself made it way harder than the later Guitar Hero games.
Yeah, so the notes, you had to be very, very precise in the first Guitar Hero, and like with every iteration on that series, they widened the timing for when you could strum and it would count. And it wasn't an elite agent thing where you would get less points.
Moon at the highest thing.
Oh yeah.
See, most people would say that they would break out the Dragon Force and do through the flames and fire.
Yeah, that's what.
Is that a different one? Is that in 2?
If that's in 2 or 3.
Through the Fire and the Flames is in 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was it in 3? I thought that was in the World Tour version.
They might have done it in both, but I know it was in 3.
Yeah, I know it was in 3 because I never played anything after 3.
And that song is ridiculous.
I remember it.
World Tour was so good.
So I have one question for the both of you, and I think it would be interesting to hear everyone's take on this. And I know that probably some of us have pretty diverse tastes, but if there's an answer that comes to mind, is there a genre or a type of game that we're never going to hear you guys talk about on ATACS?
Oh, never hear us talk about.
That's a good one.
Because, I guess when I'm thinking about myself, I'm like, like survival, MMO, JRPG, probably you're not going to hear that from me. But I don't know if you guys have genres that you're just like, this just does not click for me, or I don't understand the appeal here.
Well, probably MMOs going forward unless something changes. It's not that I've never played an MMO or enjoyed it, but I don't have any interest in playing them anymore, really. And then serious sports games, like realistic sports games. I don't really, unless it's tennis, I guess. Like the Topspin games are good.
Yeah, my first thought was sports, but I'm big into tennis and I play actual tennis as well. But I freaking love the Topspin games.
Yeah, so it's hard, but
it's hard for
MMO.
Because I used to racing games are another one I used to say I didn't like, but then the Burnout franchise came along and I loved that series.
Yeah.
Okay.
MMOs for me going forward is also one that I have no interest in. I might also say clickers for me.
That's a sad thing to hear.
Which clickers and MMOs may have some shared blood.
Yeah, they're not dissimilar.
They're both excellent. You're right.
The numbers.
I was actually thinking for me, it's probably the pure action genre. I don't like hard video games, and I don't like video games where it's relying a lot on my twitch reflexes. So anything that's a pure action game, I'm probably.
But you've played Uncharted and you're playing Far Cry. Aren't those action games?
I mean, I put exactly 90 seconds into Far Cry, and I just Will told me that you could shoot a lock on a cage and a bear comes out, and I'm just really interested in that more than anything.
There you go.
So and as far as the Uncharted series goes, that's a pretty easy game. But yes, you're right. That is probably the one exception to that kind of genre. Just because
I think you're referring to maybe platinum type games. Maybe
there's a line. There's a line
Yeah,
between power fantasy games and actually twitchy action
or
games.
Devil May Cry.
Yeah, your Devil May Cries, your Ninja Gaidens.
What?
Yes, yeah. I'll never play Ninja Gaiden, and like Super Meat Boy. I'll never really play that because that still falls into that. It's a platformer, but it's real hard. I just don't really do that.
Devil May Cry is Kingdom Hearts for adults. That's what it is.
So I guess to wrap, I mean, we could get more detailed, of course, into more recent history. I've definitely transitioned in more PC and indie stuff lately, but still try and play a lot of things in general. But I guess one thing I want to ask Nate is what handful of games do you think have been most influential to you?
So definitely, I tend to think in series for that because there are a couple series that I've played a lot of, across multiple games. So that's your Zelda, your Pokemon, your Smash Bros, your Final Fantasy, everything up to 10. And those are probably the biggest ones. Ocarina of Time is like probably the cornerstone of my gaming history if I had to pick a thing.
Yeah. Can you identify what it is about those that you think like spoke to you so much, or?
It's probably different for any particular game. I think of like Ocarina of Time and like Final Fantasy VII, which came out, around relatively the same time, and were both very influential. It's probably just like the sudden scope that video games had, and like just how big they could be, and how intricate and like complex for my like 10-year-old brain at least they could be.
Right.
I don't know. What about you?
This is always a tough question for me because I feel like there's so many.
Yeah.
Like I even look at stuff like Burnout Paradise, and it's like I don't play a ton of racing games, but I feel like that game was very influential. Or like a Freedom Fighters for third-person shooters, or and cover-based stuff, or squad stuff. Probably the biggest ones are be like, you all know me, so you know that Metroid and Zelda are big ones. Resident Evil 4 is a huge one for me. That's also another game, along with Bead Agents, that I kind of went down a rabbit hole with and mastered.
Right.
I got really into that Mercenaries minigame.
Oh God, yeah.
And the Soul, like Demon Souls, Dark Souls, that's kind of analogous to Zelda stuff in some ways. And
yeah, it is.
The Civ series I've had my time with. And even recently, like Doom was a big one for me.
Yeah,
the 2016 Doom.
Doom was a surprise for sure.
Yeah. There's been tons of really influential games. I think Mario World's also a really special one for me, being like, I guess, the first game we technically owned. And it's also a really freaking good game. That helps.
Was that the one for Super Nintendo?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's been ton, like, I actually have a list of games in front of me of like my favorite games, and like every couple of years there's at least a few games that I feel like were really influential, like just across different genres, different platforms, different technology, like just all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. For sure.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean that's a really hard question I think to answer when you have as varied of a video game experience as you guys are talking about anyway.
That could probably turn into like an episode by itself, like even maybe for any one or a small handful of us.
Yeah,
definitely. So was there anything else that the two of you wanted to touch on?
I guess
think that's good for me.
Yeah, I'll throw one last thing in there. I thought of when Will was talking earlier. He was talking about designing Age of Empires maps. I went down a big rabbit hole with StarCraft custom maps too.
Yeah.
And I feel like I had a few years after that point where I was always looking for ways to like do level editors in games and stuff, and then eventually got turned on to Dungeons and Dragons by my brother here.
Yep.
And so then that took off on its whole thing, and I still play Dungeons and Dragons a lot. So
it's fun stuff.
So what I've gathered from that is that everything in your life is Flex's fault.
Yes.
Gotcha.
You're welcome.
It happens.
And when you mentioned StarCraft, I remember all the StarCraft 2 multiplayer many of us played.
There was a lot of StarCraft 2 played there.
Yeah, at least 4 of us on this podcast right now played a whole lot of StarCraft 2 multiplayer.
I didn't play any, but that was a pretty pivotal game in my dating Paul. So
there was much artwork created of me screaming "ang, ang, 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 ang" at my computer while the Zerglings were in their base. So
there were a lot of dates that started with "Let me finish playing this match with Flex. We can go."
That's pretty true.
Which was okay. That was fine. Yeah, I thought the Zerglings were cute. So okay.
They are pretty cute.
They are pretty cute. So, Mr. Ryan, you've got a lot of things that I know that you want to tell us about. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to you. What's some of your systems that you grew up on, and your fonder childhood memories for video gaming?
Oh man, well, it's actually interesting. I kind of wanted to start off just by saying, like, just listening to you guys, I actually feel like, I mean, there are obviously some differences, but I also see quite a few parallels. Like, I played games with my own brother, who's not on the podcast. He's busy with the family, so
children.
He's not quite as into it as he used to be, but he and I still get together and play games. And another thing is I guess for anybody listening, you may or may not have picked up that a lot of the ATACS crew kind of met around a group in central North Carolina. So, Paul and Will kind of grew up close together, and we ended up going to various points in high school and college, kind of meeting up and connecting over mostly playing games, but also other things as well. But as for me, I mean, I guess I'll start off just with a little bit of what I do. I work in software, and have for the past almost 10 years now. I feel like I'm dating myself a little bit. For various tech companies. And I mean, I guess, I can go ahead and say that, like, I speak only for myself, not for any of my employers. I think that's, like, legally required for me to say stuff like that.
You are your employers.
But, it's kind of interesting because although, several of us on the podcast have some experience in computer science, none of us have worked as game developers, but we've been kind of close to what's going on. So,
right.
It's kind of interesting. Like, I did my senior design project on a video game, and I realized that making games is hard. And I wanted to make more money not working as hard.
Yeah, and
it's a smart move.
Yeah, and just as like a quick aside, like, boy, those guys have to work a whole lot of hours to pump out the video games that we play. So
yeah, a lot of respect.
A lot of respect.
But so I guess getting into my own personal history, like the rest of the crew, I kind of grew up on various games. My mom and dad had an NES, like, off and on from as young as, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 years old. I think I was playing the original Mario Bros. They thought it was cool that I could beat Bowser when I was like 4 or something like that, 3 or 4.
Nice.
Wow.
But
I'm impressed.
But yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to pinpoint because, like, well, like I said, I mean, just from the very earliest years, like, I had access to various systems, whether through my own family owning them or sometimes like aunts, uncles, and cousins. And really, I mean, starting from probably about the Super Nintendo, my family was I consider myself very fortunate that I did have a lot of major systems. Like, we had a Super Nintendo, we had, I think at some point, an original Nintendo, various Game Boys, PlayStation, N64, like, pretty much a lot of the major systems. Some of them came a little later, like I got an Xbox way later, like after it was kind of more on the cheap. And I didn't get as much into the Sega stuff. Like, we had an original Genesis, but not really like any of the accessories, or like didn't go with the Saturn or the Dreamcast. I don't think I've heard a lot of that on this podcast either. One thing that is interesting about my own history is I remember doing a fair amount of like shareware games back in like the Windows 95 era. So my family usually had a good computer, and that eventually transitioned into some of the same games that we talked about, like the CRPGs, like Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment, like Age of Empires 2, like sort of those heavy hitter games that came on a little later. But before then, I was playing like Civ 1 and maybe like some of the early SimCity and playing various shareware games, including by this one company named Epic Mega Games. Presently of Fortnite and Unreal Tournament fame. Back in those days, I was playing, I think they had a game called God of Thunder, which was really funny. And I ordered a full paid version of Castle of the Winds. So that's...
I remember that game. That was that is a deep dive into some Windows 3.1 RPGs.
Yeah, and ZZT too, if you want to go all the way back.
Oh wow!
So I had some fun times with like some early shareware games and like even I guess early internet games. But yeah, I guess growing up, transitioning more into like Super Nintendo. Like I had an aunt who liked to play games like Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, so some of that kind of rubbed off on me. Plus, like Nate and Flex were talking about, my brother and I we grew up kind of sharing some of the same interests, and we would read like fantasy books, like we would read some of the same series, like some of the Forgotten Realms books, and a lot of times when one of us found something good, like it immediately got passed on to the other.
Right.
So, we stumbled onto some CRPGs like Super Smash Bros, especially things that we could play couch co-op. Like we even would play goofy games like Super Smash TV. And even though that game was ridiculously hard, and if you sat down just to play it by yourself, it would probably be too punishing to be fun for most people. Like just playing it co-op and getting smashed over and over is a pretty good time. So
yeah, and I do you talk about kind of like weird games that you put a lot of hours into. I do remember us playing quite a bit of Command and Conquer Generals there for a little while.
Which
out of all the Command and Conquer games, Generals is the one that I don't think anyone actually remembers exists, but we put a lot of time into that game over the course of the summer.
Can I have some shoes?
I need shoes,
man. So yeah, then I guess from there on, it's kind of the rest is history. Like I kind of have kept the habit, and have just been kind of branching out more and more. And really the past 5 to 10 years have been great for gaming with like the recent indie trends and from Xbox Live Arcade all the way up until the modern indie trends. Really, I feel like now the challenge is finding what games not to play, how to keep the backlog kind of trimmed down and decide.
There's so many games and more than enough of them are good. Keeping it pared down.
What does your backlog look like?
I'd say right now, in terms of things I own, I think it's grown to. I had it down to about 20, but now it's probably back up to around 40 games of things that I would consider like front and center backlog items, plus a wish list of another 15 or so. And I mean, that's like, that's like my top tier cream of the crop, high priority stuff. Like if I wanted to go sink 1 million hours into WoW, I'm not going to be starving for games. It's just like,
right.
That's my Witcher 3 that I want to get to someday.
Right. If you had to guess, and I think I know the answer to this, what game have you sunk the most hours into?
Like, are you talking about over the course of my life?
Yeah. Like what game do you think that you have played the most of?
That would probably either be Magic or World of Warcraft, if I had to guess. But who knows? Like, I played tons of Smash Melee. played tons of. I don't think it would be something like Modern Warfare, although we played tons of that in college. Man, just
Well, Ryan, you and if I remember right, you and Paul played a lot of the Warcraft together, didn't you guys, or was it not that much?
oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
we. I even got into his guild for a little bit and went on like one raid.
What was your character's name? Because he mentions it all the time.
Turgar.
Turgar.
That's right.
Yeah, and our very first guild was Team Tussle, because we got your hustle.
That's what you say all the time. Yep.
Spamming the Baron's chat, trying to get some more guild members. That was in the OG World of Warcraft back in, like, I guess it was 04 whenever we were. Yeah, I mean, that was
04.
way long ago.
I played 6 months of WoW starting in 2004 and never looked back.
You
guys
have that
went
hustle.
down a rabbit hole. I remember plenty of mornings of waking up and you guys still playing WoW.
Like, a rabbit hole doesn't quite describe WoW. WoW is more like an open pit mine. That's really what that is. There's a lot there. Well,
Yeah,
is there any other stuff that you wanted to touch on, Mr. Ryan?
I had more questions.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steph.
It's been
Fire
so.
away.
Recently you got the. Oh my God, I'm going to say it wrong. This you'll find out. Like, I don't have a lot of old school video game knowledge. Was it the Famicom? Like, what made you go into all the Japanese, like, old school stuff?
Oh yeah. So I did. I think I mentioned previous ATACS. I did end up buying a Famicom and a Super Famicom. And it's a combination of things. One is because, like, I guess there is a bit of mystique, like, especially in that JRPG golden era. You know, there were these games which just didn't make it. So, you know, back then it's like a lot of us were catching up on our Final Fantasy VIs and our Final Fantasy IVs and eventually things like Final Fantasy V, which I actually played for the first time on the Super Famicom. So that was tough. I had to find a translated script to help me through that. But the other thing is when Flex and I decided to, like, go visit Japan just on vacation for fun, I found that there were some really good. There's a really good, like, language center here in New York where I could start taking classes, and so, you know, it's one of those things where, was there a pressing need for me to learn a little bit of Japanese? No, not really, but it's one of those cool hobbies that you always kind of want to do, or at least has always been kind of like one of those back of mind, like, personal interest things. So when we went to Japan, actually, and I saw how that hardware is not super expensive, like, because, you know, when I was growing up, like, if you wanted to import a copy of, say, the original Final Fantasy III, like the actual Final Fantasy III, not 6, you might have to pay like $70, $80, $90 to have somebody import it to Japan for you. But when we went there, you could pick it up for, like, I don't know, with the full box and manual for, like, what, maybe $20.
Yeah, I think a lot of those are going for like $20-$30.
Yeah, and that's if you wanted the box and manual. If you want just the base game, you could get it for like $10. So
Yeah.
seeing how many, like, of these games that hadn't made it, which would make kind of like neat collector's items or, you know, just fun things to try. Like, you know, there are some interesting games that just never were ported over.
Japan is weird, and I love it. So with the with learning some of the Japanese language and everything, was that just for the sake of video games, or have you ever been are you an anime fan too?
Yes. I don't really, like, when I study Japanese, I don't necessarily think of it as front and center, like, oh, I really want to, like, watch anime in Japanese or play games in Japanese, like, but that's not really kind of my primary motivation. But it does help that there's so much popular culture that you have access to. That's, you know, that I'm also in tune with, and anime is one of those things. So,
What's your favorite anime?
oh boy,
Asking the deep questions now.
Yeah, I
important
mean,
stuff.
I have trouble picking favorites, like partly because tastes change as well. I mean, if I had to
Sure.
say, like, of all time, I remember really, really liking Trigun.
Yes.
One of the first
That's
anime
one of
that
the three that I've seen.
Yeah, that one I think is really good. I'm blanking a little on more recent stuff.
Yeah.
But there, like My Hero Academia is really great from what I've seen of it. Like there are a couple more that if I thought about it for a few minutes, I'm sure I could pick something more recent that I also really love.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And I believe the first anime that I ever watched was actually whenever we went and watched Princess Mononoke.
Which is also an excellent one.
Yeah.
That would be on my short list of favorites.
Yeah, that was definitely a good one. And I'd seen just like random anime here or there, like on TV, but that was the first thing I'd actually sat down and consciously watched, and it was really good. So, all right, well, I guess as we're kind of wrapping this up, we'll shoot it over to Steph, and she can tell us about all of the exciting things that video games has been doing with her for the past recent bit. So, Steph, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay. So, I think leading off with like what I'm doing currently is a good way to start. I'm graduating this December from university. I'm getting my bachelor in fine arts with a concentration in graphic design. So I do some of the little doodles and little graphics for ATACS. I don't get to spend as much time on them as I want, so they're not as good as I want them to be. But
To those of us who
okay.
have no artistic talent, they look amazing.
Yeah,
They're
it's
very
pretty
good.
great.
Well, thank you. I know I would get roasted in a critique, but I'm glad that you guys like them. You don't hear from me a lot because I'm coming up on my last year. Like I said, my big final project's due, and since these guys have all done that part of their life, I'm sure they remember their senior projects. So it's a rough time. So I kind of wanted to answer that question that Will asked earlier about like what games won't I play. I've played a little bit of everything, and I've played this genre, but I will not on purpose go and play a horror game. I can't do it. I can make a fortune off of doing Let's Plays with my reactions. I'm no good at it. I have played some classic horror games because I had to experience it, but I stopped my last horror
Which
game.
classic ones did you play?
Oh, well, oh gosh, it's Fatal Frame. I played first and second one. I played the remake for Resident Evil, the first one on the GameCube, and I played Resident Evil 4. But where I stopped is I played Dead Space, the first Dead Space. I was super into that like story and the rabbit hole. They had like the little anime for it and everything. I was into it. Played the game the first couple seconds when, spoiler, the thing attacks you in the elevator right after the cutscene. I threw my controller across the window and broke a window in my house.
Wow.
So the jump scares are what get you.
Yep. Yeah, I don't do jump scares very well. I love psychological. Give me Silent Hill, stuff like that. I will watch someone play a scary game all day long. I particularly like listening to my husband Paul play Fear because he yells and he plays the game like he's Macho Man on steroids. And
It's
like
the only way to play those
speed.
games, really.
So I'm amused.
So, full disclosure, Paul and I
he's on reflexes. Okay, he's not on steroids.
Paul and I were roommates for a time, and watching Paul play horror games is one of the best things you can do in your life.
It is, because for me, I'm like, let me go as slow as possible, and I check out everything, and every little nuance gets me. He doesn't see half of the scary stuff because he has a chainsaw, and he set the hallway on fire, and he's running, and he's screaming.
Look, that boss didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what was coming either, but I'm just saying, like, there's going to be scary stuff. I'm just going to run at it.
I think Paul's solution to avoid scares in horror games is to just make everything as loud and messy as possible.
You're not
he's
wrong.
also the kind of person. Paul plays his stealth games by grinding enough to where he doesn't have to stealth. So,
especially when it says stealth optional, that's the best part.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so going back into my little history. So my first ever video game was on the NES. It was the Ninja Turtle game. It was brutal. It was hard.
Yeah.
That's the like the water level Ninja Turtle game?
Yeah.
Okay. I played that game too, and I don't think I ever got past the water level.
I did. I could get to the army base, but I could never beat Shredder. So,
I
color me.
I never played the NES Turtles games, but I heard they were pretty brutal.
Oh, they were brutal. And then classics Mario 1, 2, 3. I used to play the Ninja Turtles a lot because huge Ninja Turtle fan growing up. But really, I would watch my dad play the Mario, and Mario 3 particularly has like a big sentimental value to me because I would watch him, and I wasn't very good at the Mario games at that time. So I would draw the characters instead, and the little songs for the levels, I would sing along like whatever he was doing. So it'd be like, you are jumping on a block and you're gonna kill that guy, and that's the kind of stuff I would do. Yeah, so my dad and I bonded a lot over and man, I was on the ball like for game systems to start out with. We got a Sega. Some of the key games for Sega for me was Spider-Man and X-Men, Arcade's Revenge. A lot of Spider-Man games, Spider-Man, Maximum Carnage. Of course, Aladdin, Lion King, Toy Story. Yeah, I was really on the ball with those games. And then I have a little brother who's 6 years younger to me who got into racing games, so we had all the Need for Speed games on our computer. And I played those too. Mostly just enough to get good enough to beat him and make him cry because I didn't like my brother for a long time. So,
man, this sounds
dark secrets.
Yeah, but this took a turn
on next episode.
Yeah, really. Then I didn't play any video games for a long time. Times got a little hard, so we couldn't really afford it anymore. So I took on like babysitting jobs, and I bought the first PlayStation like long after it came out, and was introduced to my first JRPG, which was Legend of Mana, and it opened up a new world to me. Like it wasn't turn based, but it was still a JRPG. The fact that the characters were cute and chibi, and they reminded me of like things that I really loved at the time, like Outlaw Star and Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, all of that. Like, I'm like, it's the same kind of thing. And then I learned about Japan.
Ta-da! You found Japan.
And then that's when that started happening. I was like, I want more of this. What is this? Chrono Cross became a thing. Final Fantasy VIII was my first Final Fantasy. It really helped that I was like a starry-eyed teenager, and I was like, it's a love story. Oh. And then, but then like the PS2 came, and then an explosion of JRPGs happened, just fireworks, tons. Final Fantasy X is a pinnacle game in my life. Huge emotional game because my father worked a lot, and we didn't have a lot of time to spend together. But when I played Final Fantasy X, my dad would sit down and watch me. And I would wait. I would just grind. I would beat all the bad guys and level up. And then when he got home, I would do the story stuff. And he watched me play through the whole game.
Man.
What?
No, I mean, this is just, Paul can vouch for this. This is such a different relationship with parents and video games. I mean, I have had such a tremendous guilt complex to overcome when it comes to like playing video games because it was deeply instilled into me by my cranky ass father.
No, my dad would be like, you didn't go through any more story. I have to know what happens to Waka next. And I'm
My
like,
dad
don't
would be
worry.
like, "That's the devil. Go outside."
It's
I
not
can
funny.
definitely vouch for that. That is a thing. We were sitting there. There was a big sleepover, and there were 4 of us sitting there playing Perfect Dark. And then Will's dad comes walking through. You guys gonna play that all day? And I'm pretty sure I was just shitty enough as a 13-year-old to be like, "Yep." And then that was
You're shitty enough
pinnacle
now
of
to do that.
Well, yeah. You're not wrong.
Anyway, that's cool though. That's awesome that you guys were able to bond over that.
Yeah.
That's not a thing that happened to me.
It must be weird hearing that then. You're like, what? That happens?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, after he watched me play the game, I watched him play through the game, and it was his first JRPG. So that game has a lot of emotional hold on me. But then I moved out, graduated high school, and got a job, like a really, nicer paying one. And oh my God, the video game explosion. I went down rabbit holes. Devil May Cry, Halo. Then I would any JRPG I could get my hands on, like Xenogears, the Disgaea series, all the Final Fantasies, Kingdom Hearts, Valkyrie Profile, Shadow Hearts. Shadow Hearts is probably one of my favorite JRPG stories. The first and second one are really good.
That actually is pretty good. I picked up the first one in college.
Oh
And
yeah,
my
the
roommate
battle
was-
system with the Judgment Ring was so good.
My roommate was like, "Why aren't you buying the second one?" I was like, "Because I want to save my money."
That's fair. That's fair. I think the second one was a little bit better, but that just could be because I was hungry for more. So when I started playing the Tales of games, then I got a 360. Another big game for me was Tales of Vesperia, because the Tales of games, you can have multiple people playing with you, which is weird for a JRPG. Like that's usually like a one-person thing. But there were 4 characters, and there were 4 of us that would get together every night after work, and we played that game together. And that was a big deal. But then started the era of rhythm games. I saw some people playing DDR and went, those people look cool, and tried to replicate that. And I never did, but I did get good at rhythm games. Guitar Hero came after that, Rock Band, anything where I could push buttons to music, I would play it.
What if you could tap a touchscreen to music?
Yeah, Elite Beat Agent was my first one on the DS. And then
I do know that you have some appreciation for World Tour, the best Guitar Hero game.
it was the best Guitar Hero game, but fuck the drums. I will never be able to play drums, not even pretend drums. But my jam was the bass. Like, I could play the guitar stuff, and I was pretty impressive at one point, but I always played bass because it made me find a new appreciation for bass lines in music.
Yeah.
And then, so recently, kind of just got into Nintendo again because I didn't have any more systems. I didn't have the Super Nintendo 64. So Mario Kart, Zelda, Pokemon, I didn't have a Game Boy or nothing. Like, those are all new for me that I just experienced in the last couple of years, and I really think I got the better end of the deal. Because those games are all really good.
Mm-hmm.
Just started PC gaming. I was never a PC gamer. I like Banished and Stardew Valley, and I like these things, but I don't understand how you guys play shooters stuff. It's just not the same without my my gamepad. So I don't know if PC gaming's for me, and I know like I'm the oddball out here.
It's a weird thing. I think you get used to certain things, I mean, like I remember I had really barely touched controllers for the longest time, and then I got a 360, and the first thing I tried to play on it was, my friend tried to get me into Modern Warfare, and I remember jamming my nose into fences and sliding along the side. I'm imagining getting like friction burns on my forehead because I can't turn the stick the right way. So, I mean, you just get used to certain things,
Yeah, and that was actually the exact same thing that happened with me too. Is I'd been PC first person shooter forever, so WASD and mouse, And then the first console shooter that I ever came back and played was Modern Warfare 4 for 360. Like 6 months after you guys had already started. So you guys are all great, and I'm like, how do I not look at the sky? I need some help with this.
Yeah.
That's the opposite for me. Like, Paul and I went back and we were going to play the first Borderlands again on PC. And like I had just gotten finished like playing Borderlands 2, like the whatever console it was, and kicked ass, and then got on the mouse and I couldn't kill anything. It was the worst. So I don't know if I can make that change.
It's definitely about what you're used to.
Yeah.
GoldenEye messed me up for a long time.
Yeah.
I still have inverted controls on a.
I hate that.
And it's all from GoldenEye. Like
I'm still an inverted controls guy, and it's all GoldenEye's fault.
Yep.
And I say I hate it because him and I will play games together. Like we're playing God of War right now together, and we'll pass the controller back and forth. And I always have to change the damn controls every time I get the controller back, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
The other thing GoldenEye did, so like the modern convention for dual joystick is the left stick is move, so that's move straight forward and back, and straight left and right, you're strafing. And then the right stick is all you're turning and looking. GoldenEye like mixed and matched that stuff between the thumbstick and the C buttons.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not retrain my brain out of the GoldenEye format for years. And for a while, shooters, like I remember for the first Halo, let me like basically use GoldenEye controls. And eventually shooters stopped allowing you to do that. And I was operating on like a good 8 years of those controls at that point, and had to fully relearn at some point. That was a process.
That sounds awful.
Muscle memory.
Yeah, it's hard to overcome. It really is.
I mean, that's your problem, is that you just play too much GoldenEye.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, me and Paul have some GoldenEye memories. I guess everybody does. You know?
Yeah,
Not me.
there was a lot of GoldenEye played back in
I'm
those
pretty
days.
sure the only time I've ever stayed up all night, 24 hours playing video games was GoldenEye.
Wow. Why?
Because I was a dumb 12-year-old. It's really what it boils down to.
I can't really judge too much. I think the deepest shooter I ever got into, or the deepest I got into a shooter, was Halo. Like I was in a guild, I was ranked, I was some hot shit on Halo 3. I probably can't play it anymore to save my life, but I would spend 12 hours a day playing Halo when I didn't have to work. So that was my jam. But the problem is, I tried to switch over to Call of Duty, and the first Call of Duty I ever played was at Paul's apartment, and I couldn't do it because everything just kept exploding and screaming at me. And I started to feel like they felt like jump scares to me. Like there would be like just names I don't understand, like Rodriguez or whatever, or who's this guy, who's that guy? I don't know what story's happening. I'm a terrorist, you're a terrorist, things are on fire, I'm underwater. I don't understand. So I couldn't.
That's pretty much all the Call of Duty campaigns in a nutshell. Things are exploding and they're yelling at you to go to this place and you don't know where that place is.
Yep, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm shooting at things, and it just doesn't matter. Yeah, so that's me.
That is a step. So I know that you said Legend of Mana was your first JRPG that you really got into.
Mm-hmm.
So how old were you whenever you got into that one?
I was in middle school.
Okay.
14.
Okay, so really for the first part, like of your younger life, it was mostly a Genesis kind of platforming.
Yeah, a lot of platform game, and then like a 5-year lull in my life, and then the JRPG started.
Yeah.
Do you think JRPGs are still kind of like the thing you gravitate towards the most?
They definitely are. Whenever I'm looking to play a new game, I think. Like he mentioned muscle memory. I think I just automatically go to JRPGs.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's not. I'm having a hard time finding ones that make me feel as satisfied as I used to.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of like genres that are kind of doing some weird inbreeding with each other. Because even playing God of War, I kind of sometimes feel like, oh, it's like a JRPG. Look at this tree. I'm leveling up this tree. Cool.
Yeah. Most, I would say most video games have adopted JRPG mechanics at this point in time.
Yeah, so everything kind of feels like a JRPG in some fashion. I watched Paul play all of Witcher 3, and I was like, oh, it's just a JRPG with dodging. Check that out.
Check it out.
Check it out. But I don't know. I'm having a really hard time finding games that I love as much, and I'm wondering if that's just...
I mean, you've also played a lot of them, so like
I have.
it could just be like you've kind of run the gamut at this point, and it's it's hard to get that same high again.
Yeah, the only solution is to play another 3.
Well, it's a challenge too, just to kind of to piece this sort of stuff together. Like, I mean, it's like even dissecting your own taste and why you like what you like. It's like I remember, I mentioned I was really into film, and I remember initially I was like, okay, maybe it's actors. Maybe the reason I like these certain films are because, I like certain actors. And I remember trying to watch all the films that had certain actors in it. And then, you realize that kind of the actor is just the tool of the director, and so actually, at least in my opinion, the director a lot of times is a better indicator of quality than the actor is.
So then you went down the artistic Kubrick hole, and you're like,
yeah,
everything by Kubrick is amazing.
Exactly. And I found that now, and I can't say I love everything by certain directors, but to me, it's a lot more consistent. And so there's probably aspects of that even within JRPGs, like things that maybe you can put your finger on or try and help you kind of locate. I feel like the older you get, the more games you play, you get a little bit better incrementally at figuring out what you actually like. You know?
I think that's why I'm looking forward to finishing God of War, is because just something different, cleanse the palate, try something different.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I guess that kind of just brings it back around. I
guess that ends this episode of ATACS. And...
I still have some talking to do.
Oh, okay.
So these. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us.
It's been wonderful.
You're all jerks. I just want you to know that.
If we were a dating sim, whose route would you go down?
Did somebody say something?
Star Trek Armada.
There we go. Wow, yes. I wasn't even going to talk about Star Trek Armada, but you just bring it up like that.
Oh, no.
Star Trek Armada was a real-time strategy game released in 1999.
No, thank you.
Yeah. No, so I guess first off, I'll say I'm an engineer, and I've always been a fan of, the sci-fi genre, like that sort of aesthetic. And much like Ryan, I was very into Forgotten Realms. Those books, most of them by Ari Salvatore. I read pretty much all of that growing up. And the first console that I ever had was an NES, but I didn't get one of those until I was around 5. So mostly I played NES at my cousin's house, but I do remember playing quite a bit of Burger Time and Mario 1 and this weird space game called Destination Earthstar, which I had to go look up while we were talking because I couldn't remember the name of it. And I don't know, like those games were real hard when you're 5 years old. And I remember not ever beating Mario, the original one, but I did end up beating Mario 2. That was the first game that I ever beat, and I think I was 7 or 8. And that was one of those things where I didn't really own video games. We had a video rental store, a little local place around the corner, where you could rent games for $1.50 a night. And I remember renting Mario 2 and beating it in one night and thinking I was just amazing at video games because I finally beat a Mario. Yeah.
Nice.
So.
Which
after
that's not unimpressive, really, to beat Mario 2 so quickly.
Yeah, I don't remember if Dad helped me or not. I mean, because I don't recall that he did, but that was a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. And then for Christmas, I think it was in 1994. For Christmas, I got my Super NES, and that's where I put a decent amount of hours. Was into Mario World and Mario All-Stars. The only other games I can really remember playing a lot for the Super NES were Rock and Roll Racing by Blizzard Games. That was a
Blizzard's
fun.
finest.
Yeah, that was a fun little racing game with its MIDI soundtrack of popular rock songs. Yeah, and I actually played quite a bit of Super Mario RPG. That was definitely the first turn-based RPG that I ever played. And we just rented it, so I never beat it, but I did end up seeing the ending because someone else had a save file on there, so then I loaded it up and beat the final boss. That was a lot of fun. But I guess really where I did most of my gaming was I did get a 64 almost right after it came out. That was one of the only consoles I've ever gotten like close to release, and played a ton of Mario 64, got all 120 stars, and I don't quite know how I did that. I know Dad and I played it, and then at that time I had actually moved houses, so we stopped going to the Video Mart and we started going to the Movie Mirage, which is a discount Blockbuster.
Names are great.
That. Yeah. There was many a time spent with Will and I going over to Movie Mirage and trying to find something to do in that small town. So, but yeah, played a lot of Mario 64. Played a ton of Ocarina of Time. That was actually the first Zelda game that I owned, and I played a decent amount of Zelda over at Will's house because he had it on the Super. But the first one that I owned and actually put a lot of time into and beat was Ocarina of Time.
Link to the Past remains the only Zelda I've ever played.
Yeah.
If you only play one, that's not a bad one to play.
It's not. It's not a bad one. And then I guess, I really was getting pretty deep into a lot of the earlier PC games, like right around the same time that we got the 64. That's when I started playing a lot of Civilization 1. A lot of Sid Meier's Colonization. That was a really good one.
That is a great game.
Yeah, it really is. It's pretty deep considering.
Shout out to that one did not stand the test of time or see iterations. So,
No,
there was a new colonization in the Civ 4 engine.
Really?
Yeah, I played some of it. It didn't hold up as well for me as I would have liked. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah. And a lot of SimCity 2000. I actually played so much SimCity 2000 that if you get to this one point in the game where you can start to build, they're called arcologies. They're these like self-contained like cities kind of with a huge population. And I built so many arcologies that I reached the end of the game where all the arcologies blast off into space. And I'm like, I guess I'm done with this game now. So I played that to what I consider kind of completion, and then that's when kind of the multiplayer hit was right after that, because we got a new computer and we got high speed internet, and that's when the weekends were mostly filled with a whole lot of GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, either at Will's house or my house or our friend Tim's house, and then if it wasn't one of those, a lot of Diablo 2, a lot of Red Alert 2, and a lot of Unreal Tournament. I remember playing a shit ton of that. I actually don't know what we played the most of. Will, what do you think that we played the most of back then? I feel like it was Diablo 2, but I'm not sure.
Probably. Yeah, or just us absolutely obliterated at Perfect Dark over and over.
Yeah, that was dark times. But you give me a case, you give me a K7 Avenger, and I can almost kill Tim. So that was my jam.
That counts.
Yeah, it counts. That totally counts. So, I kind of got out of console gaming for a long time after the 64. I never got a GameCube until much, much later. I didn't get a Wii until much, much later. The next console that I actually bought was a PS2, and I only bought it for DDR. And I bought it used, and I only kept it for like 6 months. I didn't really play anything on it. until I got back into console gaming with the 360, and that's where I played a lot of Modern Warfare, just a lot of Call of Duty.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You talked about DDR. How far down the DDR hole did you go? Did you play at the arcades? Did you just play at home? Did you play?
No, I don't actually know that I saw a DDR arcade machine in person until I'd already gotten done playing DDR. We played on probably the cheapest pads you could ever see.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were the soft mats that slide around the floor when you pound on them too hard.
Yeah.
What skill did you guys get up to?
I mean, I know I was playing consistently on heavy for a long time.
On those cheap pads, really?
Yeah,
it worked somehow.
How many times did you fall?
I don't think I fell at all.
Wow.
Yeah, I ended up going down. I had 2 periods of DDR, going down the DDR rabbit hole. One was during the PS2 era around this time. Later on the 360, I played all of the Universe games. Also with the soft pads, and I got to the point where I could pass most, if not all of the songs on the highest difficulty, and it was this hilarious thing of with the soft pads, I'd like place the pad, I'd have to place it very close to the TV, and for some reason, they always move back into the left.
Yep. And then you have to like reset it for the next song.
Yeah, so between every song, I would have to, drag the pad forward and to the right by like 3 feet, because that's how far it moved every single song.
Yeah,
well, fun note, you can download a game called Step Mania. You can download all of the DDR songs, and for about $70, you can buy a good foam mat that stays in place.
I have delved into the Step Mania, but I did not know of these fancy pads.
Yep, we've got one in our basement.
Yeah, and if you have carpet anywhere in your house, like the backside actually has Velcro on it, so it just like sticks to the carpet and doesn't move at all. So you can totally do that.
Good to know.
But yeah, and also college is where I picked up WoW. I'd always been sort of someone who dabbled in MMOs. I played a bit of EverQuest and Asheron's Call. Zenimax was an independent game. I try very hard not to remember anymore. Will still gives me shit about it because I showed it to him one day and I'm like, Will, this is so cool. And he was like, what is this garbage you're playing all the time?
What was it called?
Zenimax, Xenimus.
Well, we get into some nostalgia about this game. Like apparently, like I don't know, at any time someone could just murder you and take all of your stuff. So it's like there wasn't any like corpse situation. It wasn't like you died and your corpse left. I mean, you died and you exploded into all your gear and other people could pick it up. And certain people, like it was like griefers heaven. I mean, they would just like show up at your doorstep while you're like level 1 trying to kill a crab, and just murder people all the time. Like, that's it.
Classic era of flash game MMO.
Yeah. So,
oh wow.
So and it was like looking back, it had some of the worst game design that an MMO could have because like there weren't any like level requirements on a lot of the gear. So like I remember, I don't know, like I think it was Will. I got him to play it, and I gave him all this like not super high level gear, but just like good stuff. And then he like walks out of town, and some jackass just murders him and takes all his stuff. And Will's like, I don't think I want to play this game anymore.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you got more stuff? I don't know.
Yeah.
Wait, so is this how you thought that your portion of the podcast was going to go?
I mean, I'm not really, like, I'm not surprised by really any of this. But yeah, and the reason why I played Zenimax was because at the time EverQuest needed a credit card, and this guy who made Zenimax is literally a guy, and you would mail him a $5 money order to his house, and that's how you got 30 days of playtime. So I would walk to the local convenience store and get a money order and put it in the mail.
Well, that doesn't sound shady as shit at all.
Hey, the game's still around. I don't know how. But yeah, so I started playing WoW in college, and I played it for, I guess, maybe a year and a half. And then I kind of got off the WoW train and just started playing some PS2 games. And then I roomed with Flex, and he had all the games. So I played a bit of those. I'm pretty sure he almost killed me when I was playing Final Fantasy VII because I wouldn't stop running, and I was supposed to be stopping at shops and things, but I just kept running through the game, wondering why it was so hard. So that was a lot of fun.
That's Paul's gaming style is just just get to the ball. Paul's his first time playing a game, he tries to speed run it.
He still does that. I'm like, why don't you stop for a little bit and grind? No thanks.
No, just
which leads to very interesting final boss encounters.
Yeah, so I ended up beating Final Fantasy X in like 22 hours or something like that. But
I think at least 4 of those hours were the final boss.
Yeah, it took me like 4 hours to beat Jekt, which was a long time. We actually went to dinner.
God, spoilers.
There's a lot of spamming high potions.
A lot of high potions. Thank goodness for items. I would not have beat Final Fantasy VII unless I had found the X item materia to let me use 2 items in a turn. So, that's just the way that works. And got out of college, and then my first job was actually I was on the road 100% of the time. So I had to at any moment I'd have to pack up my entire car and leave. So I still really didn't get into too much of the console gaming sphere except for Call of Duty. But I did end up playing a lot more WoW, and that's where I feel like I spent the majority. I probably spent about 2 years during the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, and that's pretty much all that I did on the weekends because I was in different towns, didn't really have people there, and I ended up being like the number 1 warlock DPS on the server and like number 3 DPS overall, and I realized at some point these are not good stats to have. I should probably go do something else with my life. Put that down, and really more recently, I've been playing a smattering of stuff. I mean, we've got a PS4, we have gaming PCs, and I don't really know that there's any one genre that I definitely gravitate towards. I have gotten over my fear of horror games. I did recently complete the 3 Fear games. I'm playing RPGs off and on, and we're like Steph said, we're playing God of War right now. So I think at this point in my life is probably the most well-rounded I've ever been as a gamer. But I do still tend to gravitate towards like Witcher 3 type games, and like Elder Scrolls 4, Elder Scrolls 5. Like I love those big open RPGs with a lot of side quests. I still gravitate towards those, but I don't gravitate towards them at the expense of other things quite the way that I used to. So I think I'm more well-rounded now than I've really ever been. That's not to say that I don't still play a lot of story-driven games too. And I don't play games that are hard, by the way. Never. I played Dark Souls 3 until the game got hard, and then I downloaded Cheat Engine, and that's how I finished that game. So
one of my favorite Paul memories is Gears of War 3 had this wonderful option that each player in co-op could set their own difficulty individually. So Nate and I could be on whatever the highest difficulty was called.
I was one below it.
Yeah, and Will was somewhere in the middle, and then Paul went all the way down as easy as could be. So the rest of us were all like hiding behind cover, like, these bullets hurt. And then Paul's just like, no, they don't, just running around chainsawing everything.
Guys, don't worry, I got it. Yep, that was some pretty fun times.
So what is your philosophy on that then? Like, games should only be challenging?
I mean, like, especially just in like the last, say, 2 or 3 years, I've kind of gotten to this point where it's like, life's hard enough. Like, I have to get up and I have to go to work, and work's hard. And then I got to eat something healthy, and that's hard. And then I have to go to the gym, and that's hard. And like, everything is just hard all the time. Like, I have to mow the yard, that's hard. I don't ever want to be challenged by a video game again. Like life is hard enough. I want to see the numbers get bigger. I want to see my character look cooler. I want to see some cool story. But in the end, I never want to get stressed out unless I am actively looking for that experience.
What do you think is the last game you've played that was challenging that you actually finished?
That I actually finished?
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably something in like 2004. I really have no idea. Like, because the last game that I played that was super challenging was Dark Souls 3, and I didn't finish it. I got about halfway through. Then the only thing that's jumping to mind before that, Doom. I had Doom on like the highest difficulty because that's the way that game really should be played, and I did finish that one.
The 2016 Doom?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so it's not that you're not good at games. You just don't need to get good.
Well, and with Doom, like that one was a little bit of an exception for me because that harkened back to a whole lot of like PC type first person shooters that I spent a lot of time playing as like, you know, growing up. And like that was like, if there's any one type of game that's like my type of game with my type of difficulty, it's that Twitch kind of PC shooter, which is kind of in the vein of like an Unreal Tournament, and that's what Doom
of running and screaming and shooting.
Yeah, just like I don't want this tactical stuff. I don't want to have to think about it. Just give me a shotgun and an open area and some movement abilities, and I'm gone. And that's kind of what
you're telling me. You should have honked the difficulty up on Fear, is what you're telling me.
You know, I actually thought about it. I really did. Like, 'cause, I mean, at some point in Fear 1, I was like, you know, I bet I could, you know, turn this up and this be a more fulfilling experience. But I had that thought 3/4 of the way through the game, and it was too late by then, and I knew that I wasn't going to go back and replay it because of some weird technical jank that was kind of going on.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, if I was going to go back to my past self, I would say turn up the difficulty for Fear 1. Trust me, you'll like it a lot better that way. So that was my mistake. But
yeah.
Fear 2 and Fear 3, I didn't need those games to be challenging. Not with the way that they were kind of constructed, especially with the cover mechanics in Fear 3 not being great. But yeah, I digress.
Right.
So yeah, that's pretty much sums me up, I think, as a gaming person.
Well, I have another question.
Okay.
Actually, I'll. This is one that I came up with that I kind of wanted to ask everyone. If you had to be transported as the protagonist in one of these worlds, in any of the video game worlds, which one would you be?
Oh.
See, the reason why that one's rough is because most video game worlds are just absolutely horrifying apocalypses. But I think if I had to pick one, the one that I would pick would probably be Skyrim. That world is other than the random dragon attacks, that world's really not that bad off.
The random dragon attacks.
I mean, look, video games are going to give you something, all right? At least with that one. I mean, like, I would say Mass Effect, because those games are really good, and I really enjoyed that universe. But the Reapers are, like, right there. In fact, they're right here, and they're honking right in your ear, and I don't want that. But, yeah, if you take the Reapers out of Mass Effect, I might say that one. But I'll just go with Skyrim, I think. Anybody else have a thought?
Guitar Hero.
There you go. That's a good one.
I mean,
Tetris?
I was going to say Elite Beat Agents.
Just solve everything.
Another rhythm game. Because who doesn't want to be a dancing cheerleader that saves the world?
That's a great question.
I want to say, like, Pokemon, but I don't want to force the poor creatures to beat each other up.
Yeah.
I think Pokemon would be terrible because of that.
Yeah, I mean,
Pokemon would be
get rid of
terrible
that
for
part.
you to be in there because you wouldn't take the damn Pokemon.
It's fair.
I've always thought, actually, the 3D Prince of Persia games would be fun just to be able to do all those flips.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you were the prince and able to wall run and stuff.
What about you, Ryan?
Oh, I don't know. Unfortunately, yeah.
That's all right.
I am drawing a bit of a blank on this one.
That's just fine. You can go live in the world of Command and Conquer generals. I don't, you know.
I'd just be one of those like shady generals with like a big hat on.
Yeah, I think it fits just the perfect aesthetic, really. So, well, I guess that's just about going to wrap it up for us, guys. Thanks everyone for going back down, memory lane, talking about, what some of the things are that got you to here. And thank you folks for listening to our special edition of Adults Talking About Cool Stuff. This has been our ATACS Meet the Crew episode. So we're going to go ahead and pop out of here, and we will be back in your feeds whenever. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.